Hello everyone. Hi, my name is Carmen, and I'm a now second year PhD student at Utrecht University. I just started the second year last month. And what I'm gonna present today is a little bit of a mix of my theoretical exploration of my PhD, but using the cases of my master and some extra work I did in Colombia. By the way, I'm from Peru. And I chose this image because it's one of the paintings that you can find outside a communal salon in one of the towns in the Sumapaz Páramo in Colombia. And when the first time I saw this image, I was like, oh wow, yeah, it makes sense because the Páramo ecosystem has a lot of water, and also like in this Páramo in particular, they have a lot of glaciers, ice mountains. And then I also saw the image of a woman, and I said, okay, maybe this is related with the Mother Earth or something like that. After the interviews I did in that space, I realized that actually it's not related with the Mother Earth, but it's related a lot with the role of women and the role they played during the internal conflict in Colombia, because they were basically the ones who take care not only of the household but also of the environment, of the ecosystems. And then, or not then, but today, the women organization is really strong in the Paramo ecosystem. So they actually pay that because of that. And I wanted to highlight that because it's like the first time I saw this, I gave a different interpretation of what is actually going on behind this picture. And I wanted to have that in mind because we're going to talk a little bit about that. When I tried to structure this presentation, I was like, okay, let me start with the theory and then we're gonna go into the case studies. But I decided to do it in the other way because actually that's what happened for me. I studied these two cases in with different lenses, with a political ecology lens, but now I'm combining that political ecology with a critical geography lens. And I have other concepts that have helped me to understand a little bit better what is going on beyond what is there right now. So I'm going to start with, of course, a small introduction, then the case studies, and then we're going to go a little bit into the theory. We heard this narrative a lot. The identification of climate change and current socioeconomic conditions makes vulnerable populations exposed to higher socio-environmental risk. Yes, that's true, but there is also some other things behind it. It's not only climate change, but also other structures that are there that increase this type of risk. And then we also have a lot we also heard a lot this word like sustainable development. It has been criticized for many reasons. I'm not gonna go deep into that right now. I will go back to in the conclusions. But right now we use more this word of sustainability. But what is sustainability? I'm not gonna talk right now about that. Also in the conclusion. And what I wanted to do is a little bit something I read about the anti-theory. To not build or to not use concepts to try to frame cases into those concepts, but to use cases and to try to build, not to build, but to try to generate certain conceptualizations that are diverse and plural. And at the end, of course, we're gonna reflect a little bit on the title of this presentation, which is whose voices are shaping these landscapes of sustainability in these different case studies. So to locate us, Sumapaz is the Paramo in Colombia, but it's actually, it could be really confused what we are talking because right now Sumapaz is also one of the localities of Bogota, which is the capital of Colombia, but it's also the name of a province which is greater than that locality. But also among the people who live there is well known as the biggest paramo they have in the country and also in the world. And also among the people around Sumapaz, in Tolima, Caquetá, El Meta, Sumapaz is an historical region that doesn't have defined boundaries. So I don't want to define Sumapaz yet. I'm going to tell you that this is the capital, Bogota. Sumapaz is really close to the capital. It usually, no, not usually, it gives water to the capital, but also it has been a place where this internal conflict took place, and is still there are some remnants there still. To understand a little bit this region right now, it has been before colonization. It has been populated by indigenous communities, but today, what we have right now is people who has been displaced from other places and now creating, not creating, but practicing agriculture there. But also, there was this period between 1910 and 1946. What happened there? It was like the Guerra de los Mil Días, which is like the War of the Thousand Days, and it was kind of the start of different conflicts that happened in that area. But something that really kind of shaped what is going on is that the figure of hacienda, or I don't know if you heard about haciendas of the big farms that they have. This literally has shaped the economic dynamics in this area. So many of the peasants who were displaced and living in Sumapaz were working as laborers in the haciendas. But also it helped them to organize themselves into peasant organizations in this area. Between 1946 and 1953, there was still a period marked by conservative state violence and the emergence of the armed agrarian organization. This man, Juan de la Cruz Valera, it's very well known, Varela, sorry, is very well known in this area because he was part of the Liberal Party at the beginning, but then he led this agrarian organization, and actually the people who helped him to organize all the agrarian organization was the Communist Party, and that explains why today in this area most of the peasants are part also of the Communist Party in this area. Then in 1953, 1958, there was peace, but then conflict, peace and conflict. And at that moment, the president was Rojas Pinilla. There was an attempt to do a peace treatment, but actually didn't work because just some years ago, or 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, they signed a final peace agreement, but it's still going on. And here I wrote construction of the hydroelectric plant, but they didn't construct anything yet. It was an attempt. And I put this here because at this moment, the government started realizing that there were many resources in this area, basically land and water, and there was the possibility of building this hydroelectric plant. But actually, many of the organizations, the peasant organizations, opposed to that because, of course, it was like agricultural land. It was also their livelihood. So it has been going on until now. The hydroelectric plant is still not there, but it's still an idea that could be or could happen. And then in 1958, they signed, there was a peace agreement with the next president, but it's also called the false peace because actually there was no peace. There was still a conflict between the government, the peasant organizations, and also the paramilitary organizations that appeared at that moment. But one thing that happened in that year was that the formation of the Sindicato de Trabajadores Agrícolas de Sumapaz, which is like the organization of the agrarian laborers in this area. And this organization works until today, and it didn't separate. But now, I wanted to do it with book club, but I think we are a very small group, so we can do it like interacting and talking. I wanted to ask you, what do you think about the creation of conservation areas in the world, like such national parks? What do you think about the creation of this type of figures in this area?
So I grew up in the U.S. and I feel like a lot of the times, the formation of national park or like the usage of national parks, it's like a front almost by the government to like take indigenous lands and then protect it. Like say like, oh, no one can touch this because it's the nature here is so important, and then they kind of like utilize it as like a state power. And I also heard that with a lot of like nature conservation programs in South Africa, for example, that's also like a really neo-colonial way for like Western organizations to go in and like dictate how like where people are allowed to live in their own country and stuff like that.
Thank you for sharing that. Actually, I also had like a similar thought before going there. And what happened here in this particular area in Sumapaz, the people is not considered indigenous anymore. They are considered peasant organization, and that could be a problem. What happened in this park was that they created in 1970 the national park. There was a lot of peasants living in the area who were displaced, and now they live in the area surrounding this national park. Of course, this created a lot of economic problems for them. Also, a lot of like social conflict because where are they going to move? What is going to happen with them? So the creation of this national park basically confirmed the government interest in the water that is there in that area, but also has something like to do with the transition of power because they created the natural area, but they also created the locality 20. So that part of Sumapaz is not part of the province anymore, but it's going to be part of the capital, Bogota. So the administration will be from the municipal government of Bogota, and then it also makes them for them easy to control the flow of water. And what else I wanted to say here? Okay, but what happened after the construction of this national park? And what was the peasant perception about this? As you mentioned a little bit, yeah, they felt like, of course, they came with a policy totally against the peasant and our agricultural practices. So what National Park proposes, National Park is the organization who actually controls the national park there, is that we should not be within the park area, not even in the areas close by. So we should not carry out any activity or any agricultural activity. That was the words of one of the peasants I interviewed. And then another person said, like, first of all, they created a figure. They say this area is the base of the park, but they forgot something very important to ask the peasantry if we wanted or did not want the park right there. And as I said, this area is, or these communities are peasant communities. And actually, there is the convention number 169 of the International Labour Organization, but only defends prior consultation for indigenous and Afro-descendant communities. So the peasant communities are not included there, and they have been fighting for many years to be recognized somehow as a community, as a group that is organized, and they belong or have a relationship with the land, but they are not indigenous to that place still. So what many of the peasants in this area think is like, okay, we didn't have like the right to be consulted, but it would have been like a better entrance for them to consult and to do something with us and to talk with us to create a national park. But this already happened in 1970. So what happened after this process? Many of the peasants realized that, okay, we've been inside the park and we were burning some of the areas to feed our cattle. So that was not okay for like the biophysical process of the paramo or for the regulation of the water. So after the creation of the park, there was more environmental awareness among the peasants. But not only that, it's also like they are organized themselves into Junta Sección Comunal, which is more like a not neighborhood organization, because I'm thinking like a city, but this is a rural area. So it's more like a community organization. And among themselves, they organize and they are vigilant if somebody is born in the areas outside of the national park of not. But then they also recognized that they were involved into these dynamics of the Green Revolution. Also, like in the 60s, in the 50s, when they wanted to produce more and more food, the fertilizers were like one of the best ways to increase productivity in the agricultural areas. So they recognized that they were also using too many fertilizers. So now they have changed to the agroecological practices that were in place before the Green Revolution. And also, they are implementing other initiatives for water and environmental care, such as the protection of the springs. They call it nacederos. So all of this came after the creation of the park. So in fact, there were many negative impacts for them, especially the displacements of the land, the lack of consultation, because this also makes them feel like they are not part of this. But there were some kind of like environmental positive impacts as well in general. But if you see this, it seems like this area now is ready for more conservation initiatives. So what is going on right now is that they want to introduce, or they already introduced in other areas of the Paramos in Colombia, the payment for environmental services. It's a little bit. So this is also an economic mechanism that aims to incentivize the conservation and sustainable management of natural resources. There are plans to introduce this mechanism in Sumapaz Paramo. I did these interviews last year in February, March, April, and I heard that it has been introduced in some paramos already, like in the Santurban Paramo, which is not Sumapaz, it's another region, but also in areas close to the Sumapaz region. So this is another question for you. What would be the consequences of introducing payment for environmental services in the park? What do you think is going to happen if this is introduced? It seems like the landscape right now, it's very suitable for them to be introduced because they already are taking care of the environment. But I also asked them, and the responses really made sense for me, but I want to hear from you. What do you think that could be the consequences of this?
I clarify something first. Who should pay? Like, who is it targeted toward?
Is the government paying the peasants for like taking care of that environment?
Okay.
Mhm.
I think if I have a community, I will be happy because I assume I will get money by just doing nothing. Nothing meaning protect the area.
I thought as well, and look at the answer, especially with this part. So they tell me that they will pay me to take care of the land. For me, that's the opposite of what it should be. Because we peasants have been taking care of these things without thinking about getting paid. When they pay me, and they pay me a lot of money, I want me to work. Then I'm going to abandon my farm. But if I abandon my farm, who is taking over that piece of land later? So at the beginning, I was like, okay, what is the logic behind? But after like spending more time there, I understood they have. It's not only like a work for them. Like the agricultural practices is not only their work; it's also their livelihood, but it's also like a space of social interaction. They have some activities or some practices that they do it alone in their own farm, but they also have some more communal activities when they go to the other farms and work for the other people. And they call it convite campesino, and it's because they share things at that moment. So the owner of that farm prepares food, the other people is like dividing like the different tasks that they need to do in the farm. Some people is like maintaining the fences, other people is taking care of the cattle, other people is like organizing the garden if there is a garden in that farm. Other people is I don't know, harvesting the potatoes because this area is very good for potatoes because of the high altitude. And another person also said that we do not agree with being paid for doing nothing, because our activity as peasant is always the transformation of the land and the production of the food for them. And they don't produce that much to sell to the capital, but they produce an extra to have some income to like buy other things as well. Of course, I wouldn't understand that if they wouldn't explain me this, or if I couldn't see what I see there, or how they work in a community. It's very, for me as well, the same. The first impression would be like that. Oh, that's actually a good initiative to be paid for something that they are already doing, but it has some like problem shifting behind for them in their logic. So basically, the Colombian government wants to like pay for the preservation and restoration of ecosystems like the Paramo. They also said that one of the objectives is to minimize land use conflicts and make strategic use of the ecosystem, but they also really want to preserve this area because it supplied a lot of water for the capital, and there has been shortage of water in the last months in Bogota. So this scheme actually depicts the nature as a commodity. So I'm paying for something that is there, but for the peasants, I don't think they see nature as a commodity. They see it more as a livelihood, and maybe this like different views of something is what at the end originates this kind of problems that sometimes arise there. So they have an alternative for this. They don't want it like to have like a more natural areas, more conservation schemes there. They actually they were like pursuing to create like a zona de reserva campesina, and in this zone they will combine agricultural activities but also with conservation activities. They will need some funding from the government. There is still like something going on there, but they have been recognized finally in 2022 as a zona de reserva campesina. They are still working on like the different, let's say, characteristics that they will have in this area, but they want, of course, to like combine these two activities. They already said like they will have agroecological practices. What I was sharing with you about the Convite Campesino in the Manos Vueltas, which is like to work for the community or to like work in different farms every time. And I'm not going to go deep into this, but it's also something like I saw there about the communal aqueducts and the price of water. And the question is, should we pay for the water we receive at our homes?
No.
No.
Yes,
Yes.
because of the processing and the cleaning it requires, and the pipe maintenance and things like that.
I also thought like we should do that in order to like maintain that. And then they told me no, as you told me, because they do their own maintenance of the pipelines. They do their own maintenance, but the government is giving them like clarification kits, which is actually something that costs money, but doesn't cost that much money. So there is still something going on there, and it's still going to be defined by them. But I didn't want to go deep into that. But they have this strong position that they do not want to pay for the water they have at home because they never have paid. But some of the communal aqueducts right now are being organized as a not as a firm, but as a small kind of public firm. But this is still something going on there. And now I'm going to go to the second case, and this is the case closer to me because I'm Peruvian. And this is the Ica Valley. Have you heard about the Ica Valley before? No. Peru is here. We have like three big natural zones: the Amazon, the highlands or the Andes, and then the coast, which is basically desert. The Ica Valley is is the biggest valley of agricultural production in Peru. But if you see, it's on the coast. There is no water, but still it produces a lot of food for everyone. If you go to Alberheim and see sometimes like the blueberries, some of them come from Peru. The avocados, some of them come from this area. And we export like a lot. But there are also smallholder farmers that are not agribusiness in this area. And a big problem is happening here. I did interviews in two areas to try to like see what is going on in the upper part, which is still the valley. This part is called La Tinguiña, and this is like the most lower part, and this part is called Okuka. So I'm going to explain now a little bit of the history of what is going on there. Basically, in 1990s, the government created these neoliberal policies to attract more investment or foreign investment. So a lot of agribusiness came to the area. But before the agribusiness, there were already some haciendas, the big farms that belonged before to the, in this case, to the Spanish. They were there, but the agribusiness or the intensity of the agribusiness started in the 90s. What happened? They started building large irrigation systems and the overexploitations of the aquifers in this area. So if you see in this image, the depletion of the water table between 1970 or the 1990 until the 2000, this one is I think until 2012, it went really down. So in this area, almost never rains. So the water supply for the houses depends on groundwater, or sometimes in the water that comes from the rain from the Andes, that feels like the different rivers, not the different rivers, like a couple of rivers that cross these areas. But if they are using most of the water that is in the aquifers for agribusiness, then they leave the people without water for consumption. But also they left the smallholder farmers without water for their own consumption because the agribusiness, they use the aquifers, but the smallholders, they do not use this. And before going to the next slide, there is something that they call the efficiency problem. Because the government saw that the way the different smallholder farmers irrigate their lands here is not efficient. And in 2015, I'm pretty sure you heard about the water footprint, because we use that for our own consumption, how much water we are using for the clothes and everything. This concept was translated into the agricultural practices. How much water the smallholder farmers use to produce the food, and how much water the agribusiness use. And according to this blue certificate, the agribusiness are more efficient using water than the smallholder farmers. Yes and no. There are something going on there. Well, I already asked you this question, so I'm going to pass. And this is actually an efficient irrigation or not. They have, the smallholder farmers, or most of them, they have a special practice called the irrigation by pozas. And I'm going to show you a picture in the next slide. But this practice, it comes from ancestral times, even from pre-colonial times. So it seems actually that they are using a lot of water if we measure the water by time and by volume. But if we measure like in a longer period, it doesn't actually. Instead, of course, it's more easy to measure how much water are we using for drip irrigation than for this practice. I'm going to pass this to actually show you a picture of the pozas. These are the pozas in the Ica Valley. This size of pozas, we don't find it anymore in La Tinguiña. This is more in Ocucaje, in the lower part. And actually, the first time I saw this type of irrigations was when I was here in 2021. What they do, and actually surprised me, of course, you see like a huge swimming pool filled with water, and you say, oh, they are using too much water. The agribusiness is not using the same amount of water. So yeah, of course, this at first sight looks like really inefficient, but they just do this once per year, or now twice because of the availability of water, climate change, more severe droughts. But what they do is like they fill this and they wait like a couple of months or a month and a half until all of this water has like disappeared dry. And then they plant the different seeds. Or sometimes when they have like trees, they just leave the trees or the vines there and then just fill their pots in this way. The advantages of this is like even noticing they are recharging the aquifers because the water is going down. And actually, you can see that after the pots are filled, they have a little bit of more water available for water consumption. So somehow it's related with that as well. But also, since this water doesn't come from the aquifers, it comes from the mountains, from the rain, during the rainy season in the mountains, it actually comes with some of the minerals that are natural fertilizers for this soil. And another thing that is has no, I think that is all I wanted to say. But it surprised me that they used to do it just with one, or just filling these ones, and then they will have like the production for the whole year. And in this area, these smallholder farmers, a difference of like the Sumapaz region, they can produce a little bit extra to sell to the local market and even to like the capital in Peru. So the socioeconomic conditions are bad, but not that bad. But many of them are leaving behind this practice because most of them they want to sell to markets and they need the blue certificate for that. So when you need this blue certificate, you cannot keep doing this type of irrigation anymore. So it's like a consequence of an idea of sustainable water management and more efficient water management. But I'm also combining this with history a little bit because what we have right now there is the product of what happened before since colonial times, but also since pre-colonial times, because this process practice or this process irrigation practice, it comes from pre-colonial times. Then, when the Spanish arrived, they tried to divide the land, and they basically left to the indigenous people in the lower part, in Apucaje, where it's like the area right now where they have these bigger process. The upper part was basically for the haciendas, for like the big farms. And then during the 16th, 17th century, they introduced a figure of the water judge because they were using, even like the Spanish people, they were using the water that comes from the different rivers. But they realized that irrigating at the same time like was not as productive for them. So they of course divided the morning shifts for the Spanish people and the night shifts for the indigenous people. And that's actually something that like a spatial distribution that you could see until now. Then after the independence, of course, the agricultural frontier expanded, demand for more water, but they still had some water, the water that comes from the different rivers and canals was still enough. But since the indigenous people were at the lower part, they were the last to receive water. So many of them were not having like enough production, and many of them start working as laborers for the big haciendas on the upper part. So that's also like a shift that that materializes into like leaving behind the agricultural practices there. Between the 1930s and the 60s, there was a second agricultural expansion, more demand for water. They started to use groundwater for irrigation, especially in the haciendas. There was, they tried to promote like agricultural modernization, and this is an idea that came from outside. And this was the moment when they have these irrigation engineers, some of them from here, that said like, oh, water infrastructures, we need more dams, we need more reservoirs to produce more. So of course that was there was a reflection on that in this part, in this time as well. So another thing that happens with this agricultural modernization, because the infrastructure, the hard infrastructure, the dams, the reservoirs, they were kind of built to try to control how much water you are using, or to try to see how much water are using, because they always want to see like numbers or quantities. And the communal property, that was something very common for communities, was seen as a way to not control this water as much. They were trying to promote individual ownership, but that figure didn't fit that much with these people, with the people who were living in the Ocucaje. And also, they were introducing new types of irrigation as a furrow irrigation. I'm gonna go fast on this because I don't know if you heard about the agrarian revolution in Peru. It was one of the few cases of partially successful revolution. What happened is like these big haciendas, these big farms were divided and given to the laborers, given to the people who were actually working the land. It was socially successful, yes. It was an economic disaster for the people who got the small parcels, because they got a small part of land, but they didn't get access to water, they didn't get access to like different things that they need actually to be productive. Some of them tried to, again, organize themselves into cooperatives. Didn't work because there was corruption behind. But it was something needed. It was something, the agrarian revolution there was something needed. And until now, you can feel that if that didn't happen at that moment, it will be like a bigger revolution after that. But after this, after the agrarian revolution, the government created irrigation commissions that work until now, that try to like control again how much water goes to the smallholder farmers. Since the agribusiness use groundwater, they are not part of these irrigation commissions. And then again, we go to the 90s, to the introduction of these neoliberal policies, which is actually what we have right now there. In the 2000s, the different agribusiness companies, they have consolidated the power in the control of the land and the water in this area. Many of the smallholder farmers they have sold their land for agribusiness. They have sold their land to be now, because there was also like an expansion of the city. So many of this land now is like a urban area. Now it's an urban area. And there was the creation of this organization that tried to control somehow, tried to like have some intervention in the control of groundwater, but it's actually still there. And then again, what is going on there in the first area on the higher part of the interview, the pozas have become smaller. Many of them have changed into another type of irrigation practice. They don't practice irrigation by pozas as often as they used to be. They have realized also like the water that comes from the Ica River that try to fill most of this canal is not coming as good quality as before. That was one of the words I use. And many of them, as I told you, they have sold the land for like to serve as an urban area now. This is another quote of one of the farmers that remember what it used to be there, what it used to happen there when they have these big pozas, and he refers to these big pozas as they were swimming pools because they were big. But now, if you see this area, or if you see this picture, you see that the size of the pozas has become smaller and smaller. In this case, this is a small pecan tree, this is a bigger pecan tree, and it's surrounded by cactus and bananas, but yeah, it has changed. And for now, what is going on in this upper area, since they don't believe that the quality of the water is good enough for the products, they also have started using groundwater to irrigate and sometimes to fill this or to try to like keep the humidity on the soil. But that costs more money for them because not all of them own wells. So that also decreased the amount of money they could earn selling their products. Many of them are trying to like change into this drip irrigation, but there were many stories of failure about that because the land in this area on the upper part is not completely plain. So the drip irrigation doesn't really go down and doesn't really irrigate the land. So yeah, that's some of the problems there. But also what happened is like people that they were peasants or farmers in the highlands, they are coming to the coast because this area is good for production somehow. And they are imitating the practice of these people. They are trying to imitate the practice of possums because they see it could work. It's also like you don't need many technology of infrastructure to build this, and still you can irrigate the area. And what happened on the south, on Obuka? The size of possums are still like big. In this area, the community has organized themselves to try to resist the introduction of certificates, so the blue certificate, also like the introduction of like this mentality of changing to drip irrigation. They still believe that this area is really dry to just do drip irrigation and to like buy the water from the aquifers. So they are still maintaining the bosses, but another thing is going on. Something else is going on. This is the river. Yeah, and this was the time when it was supposed to be filled. That was February 2020. It was COVID time. It was 2022. That was February 2022. So this guy actually like is one of the, they call it tomeros. They kind of control how much the distribution of water. He's part of the community, but he's being paid also like by the different farmers there to like let them know where the water is coming. So he told me like, yeah, we are already February. The water used to come in January, but we do not have water right now. And if we do not irrigate our fields, we're going to lose all the production for this year. So what they did is try to irrigate that year with groundwater. Also like, there are some smaller canals, but doesn't reach all the farms. So yeah, they have to look for alternatives in this case when water doesn't go. And until now, do you have any questions for me about something I missed in these stories or something that didn't? It's not clear yet before I go to the theory part.
Is there a specific reason or group of reasons that the river is not flowing anymore? Because
Yes.
it's coming from far away, right?
Hmm?
It's coming from far away, so the local action didn't affect, like couldn't have affected it.
No. It's actually that sometimes, not sometimes, now with climate change, the periods have changed, have shifted. So it's probably gonna rain, but the next month. It's not like as accurate as it was before. And they used to rely a lot on the water coming in January or February, but it's not happening anymore. Maybe they will change the times they plant the seeds, or maybe they will try to look for other options. But that year it was really hard for the production in general of this area. Then I used to see these cases through through the lenses of political ecology and who control or who doesn't control the water. And yes, it helps me to explain a little bit what is going on there. But actually, there is a lot of other things going on there. And I am now exploring this part of the critical geography called geographies of knowledge, but from a decolonial perspective, or they call it the decolonial term. And it's been inspired a lot about with this concept of situated knowledge by Donna Haraway. But what decolonizing geographies of knowledge try to do is not only to look for these concepts that are very established there, but also to look for concepts that are that were originated in the South, or what I call the tropical global South. And there are some concepts here. I'm not going to go deep into all of this. I'm just going to try to analyze these two, coloniality of knowledge and climate coloniality. And both of them has been inspired by, of course, Donna Haraway, but they have their own roots in like more local South situations. So first of all, we have like Haraway, and what she says basically like knowledge is always situated. It's produced from specific locations, perspectives, and context. And now I go back to these different ideas. The payment for ecosystem services, the creation of natural parks, they come from specific areas and they somehow serve or make sense in that areas. But sometimes when you try to replicate that in other areas, you see that there is like don't want to use that word conflict, but there is a disimbalance on the results, not always 100% positive. Then we also have like a partial perspective, or she said like every knowledge, or we always have a partial perspective of a situation. We don't have like that total perspective of this. And this is shaped by the position of the observer, which includes factors like gender, race, class, location, or even for us, our own formation. I'm a geographer by training and a physical geographer actually. I move a little bit into social science. But as you, Linda, I also, when I heard about pests, I said like, oh, yeah, it's actually a good idea to try to promote conservation and at the same time pay these people who's actually owning this land for conservation. But I didn't saw the other possibilities that they saw it. And at the end, of course, the positionality, because knowledge is always produced from a specific position. Even what I'm telling you here is how I interpret the stories of the farmers. They could even like have more and more details behind, but this is what I could grasp of the whole situation. And this made me think a lot of like the different positionalities we have and how we are producing or shaping our knowledge. And I go back to the image that I showed you at in the first slide. What I thought at the beginning from my position for the knowledge I carried from before, it was different. It has a different meaning of what it actually was for them. So one thing could have different meanings for different perspectives from different positions. And then it comes this concept of coloniality of knowledge. It's a concept created, let's say not produced, created by a Peruvian sociologist called Aníbal Quijano. And he said like there is an influence of colonial power structures on the production, validation, and dissemination of knowledge. Colonialism has imposed specific ways of knowing and understanding the world. And actually, when I go back to the different cases, I say, okay, yeah, this is coming, actually that even the distribution of water in the Ica Valley comes from colonial structure or spatial colonial structures in the past. There is more resistance in the lower part because this land belonged before to the indigenous people. And in the upper part, this land belonged before to like the hacendados of the big farms. So even this spatial distribution has a consequence on the spatial distribution of water. and actually on the consequence of like the different irrigation practices in this area. And the final concept, and this is just two questions that I want to raise right now. Why are POSAs seen as less efficient than drip irrigation or furrow irrigation? And why are conservation policies considered more important than food sovereignty in these areas? Just for you to talk, we're gonna put that in the conclusions. And the other concept is climate coloniality, because remember at the beginning I told you climate change is happening. Yes, it's affecting vulnerable population. Yes, but there are also historical roots of environmental exploitation and unequal responsibilities on this. So we need to also like try to see this process with that lens to have like the full picture. And then whose climate narratives, like the experience about droughts that people in the lower part of the Ica Valley is experiencing. Then they also have the land grabbing, especially for conservation purposes, as you mentioned before. It happened in many parts, but it's still happening. And the explanation behind is like, we need to preserve this area because it has a high biophysical importance, but still land grabbing is happening. And something that is going on right now, some conservation initiatives are also part of the green capitalism, like the pest mechanisms. They are market oriented. They are seeing again the nature as commodity, and then this type of logic behind conflict. I don't like the word conflict, but yeah, it's the word. Conflicted a lot with the peasant logic behind. So before I conclude, do you have some questions? Okay. So I was again trying to not see these cases, but to try to reflect on these cases using these new concepts and what is going on beyond the actual distribution of water and power, the actual distribution of land, is that the Suma Pass region, of course, has this expression of power scheme. It reveals relations marked by power, but also has a socio-historical and a spatio-temporal context. All the history of the Suma Pass as a historical region is reflected today in what is going on there, is reflected on the type of peasant organization that they have. These peasants have organized and developed forms of resistance and defense to stay in the territory over the years through their collective work, through the self-organization that has accomplished the recognition of the Zona de Reserva Campesina, in peasant movements for the defense of the páramo, but also the conservation policies have been put forth as alternative capable of aligning with the dynamics of this region. But it's still harming the livelihood of the peasants because these logics are not talking. In the case of the Ica Valley, the POSAs as a practice have survived different changes in agrarian policies through history. That's actually why I was interested in this, because it's one of, with other 3 types of irrigation that exist in Peru, is one of the few that has survived until now. And the operation or like the practice of irrigation of the POSAs also indicates the importance of considering this infrastructure and practice at the time of making decisions about groundwater in the valley. This ancient technique has been recharging the aquifer as a consequence of the irrigation practice per se, without even like trying to force or trying to create new policies to recharge the aquifer. And if you realize, I didn't want to give any definition of sustainability, because in the different cases, sustainability has different shapes for them. Sustainability for the Peruvian government means less use of water. For the smallholder peasants in this area means recharging my POSAs, practicing the irrigation by POSAs and just recharging the aquifer as as a consequence of that. In the case of the Sumapas Paramo, they believe that sustainability is also have something to eat for them as a community, but at the same time protecting the area where they are. For the government, sustainability is trying to give water for the people, the population in the capital. So sustainability has like different conceptions in these different cases. So if you ask me what is sustainability right now, it's kind of all of this and at the same time a combination of this. And the current situation is not only the consequence of climate change. There are more structural causes that we need to see it. And this lens of climate coloniality, I hope it helps me in the future to keep analyzing these cases. And the different ways of understanding efficiency and sustainability can converse, can talk, and even learn from each other to jointly contribute to an environmental or to try to solve an environmental issue, to try to overpass climate colonialism, try to overpass that this initiative is better than this other initiative because comes from this Western conceptualization, Western perspective. And then I wrote something like map local knowledge and understand how these practices are being materialized in these territories. Try to situate. Because we usually see things or initiatives as something that can be implemented generally. Right now, what they were discussing in the COP, oh, we need to do this in this different context. But have you taken into account the local dynamics of the people? So always have to try to consider the situations of every dynamic. So with that, I conclude my presentation. I don't know if you have any questions. Or something else that you want to know about this case that maybe I forgot to mention, maybe I can remember.
I guess I was wondering if there were like how much community projects there were to like advocate for like sub-governance or like food governance. Like I know you mentioned, but I guess I was wondering how tight is the network, let's say, or like the interaction, let's say.
That's a good question, and it's different in each case. I had the perception that in the Sumampas Paramount they are not isolated or they are not just there because most of these peasants are adhered to the Communist Party. They have different initiatives along the country. Along the country. So it's very the organization in that case is very strong. In the case of and they have this. When I went there last year, they have this like national convention of agroecological practices where they try to share like different cases of how they were like actually implementing these agroecological practices. In the case of the Ica Valley, it's not that strong. Mm-hmm. The Okukaje or the smallholder farmers in the Okukaje have organized themselves, but it didn't escalate to a national level. In the other part, they are in La Tinguilla, in the upper part, they are not even organized. Each of them are like just changing, trying to or trying new alternatives because sometimes it's not the irrigation they are using is not working. So they are even like less organized than the lower part. But yeah, I saw that it's very different in this context. And one of the causes, I think they are more organized around like a political party there. And here is more like not here, in Peru is more like a communal organization only that didn't, locally, not on a national level.
And does the party also push policies?
They have their guidelines. They have their guidelines for the whole country because it's like the Colombian Communist Party. Mm-hmm. But they do not have. They are not recognized officially in the government, so they cannot push policies like that. But as you, or maybe you, I don't know if you heard, but the president right now in Colombia, he was before part of the guerrilla. So now he has like promoted a lot of like policies for the peasants, but without the party per se, but with his own party. So yeah.
I have some question. So what do you think still is the remaining effect of the agrarian revolution that Velasco applied, especially to the haciendas that are still affecting the Caballero?
What is the main consequence?
Yeah, one of the main consequences.
Like the successful one.
I mean, it could be both because there's a lot of like criticism towards the revolution because many people see it's like nationalization of resources as something great, but as well as you said, a lot of corruption and mismanagement of these resources ended up causing a lot of like this inequality of breeding.
Yeah, if I say this is my personal opinion. I feel like the agrarian revolution in Peru was successful socially. The recognition of the people, of the laborers, was important at that moment. They tried to organize themselves, but they didn't have like the economic, the economic enablers to success in this case. And one of the, I could say like the negative is like it had led the people with a sentiment of like we could have do more of this. We could have like when we had the land for us, we could have organized better, we could have prevent corruption. And sometimes, not always, sometimes you have this narrative coming from them as well, like, yeah, maybe we didn't organize well, we didn't success in this because they had the opportunity. But overall, it was very needed. I think it has, of course, it didn't eliminate the inequalities. It didn't it didn't eliminate inequalities, but I can say like somehow it reduced a lot of the gaps there. Many of the people who got some part of the lands today, or not that people, but the daughters and the granddaughters or grandsons of these people now are seeing the benefits of that. Somehow they could access to education, they could access to more, how can I say, means to get there. So socially, I think it has an impact. And if we compare with other countries in South America that didn't went through the same process of revolution, you see the differences in that. Thank you so much, and I hope I somehow share these cases with you and has like opened a little bit the interest of this topic about these topics. So thank you.